Hello and welcome to today's webcast, Host Profitability and Managing SPLA Licensing, brought to you by your Insight Microsoft Commercial team. I'm Claire Folger, your CST Marketing Coordinator at Insight, and I will be your moderator today to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters. The webcast console you are looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. All questions from this webcast will be captured, and there will be a Q&A during the last few minutes of the presentation. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the question mark icon below the presentation window. The help guide covers common technical issues. I would now like to turn it over to our presenters, Brandon Suargo and Brett LaForge. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Claire, and hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's session. I am Brandon Suargo, a SPLA Services Specialist here at Insight. Today's topic for Meet the Experts is Host Profitability and Managing SPLA Licensing. At Insight, we are always looking for more ways to support you as a service provider. Today's session is an extension of this effort, an overview of how you can leverage our relationship with our globally recognized partner, Octopus Cloud, to better your bottom line. And with that, here is the team for today's presentation. From Insight, myself and Joe Miller, our services BDM specializing in SQL. From Octopus Cloud, our main presenter will be Brett LaForge, Director of Marketing and the founder of the two licensing websites listed here, as well as Yuri Lau, Senior Sales Manager, who will be on hand as an additional resource for any technical questions. And with that, Brett, the ball is yours.
Hey, thanks a lot, Brandon. Thanks a lot for joining today. Yeah, so as Brandon alluded to, Brett LaForge, been in the SPLA business for many years, and I've seen a lot of ups and downs and what's happening in the world of SPLA, and we all kind of have that question. We'll address some of that today, but I thought I'd put together a little bit of agenda. And the first one is, talk about Octopus Cloud, like who are we, what we do, and why is it relevant for your business. I'm going to take you on a trip down memory lane, so talk a little bit about SPLA past and present, and maybe a little bit about the future of SPLA and what that looks like. Then we're going to talk about how this all correlates to the public cloud, whether it's Azure or AWS or the public cloud in general, or even out of your own private data center. And then hopefully at the end, we'll have some Q&A opportunities as well. If you have any questions on any of this content or want to learn more, you can always contact sam@insight.com, which is labeled there. So who is Octopus Cloud? Well, in a general sense, I define ourselves as a business intelligence tool specific for service providers. We call ourselves Octopus because we're in all sorts of different data center environments where we want to touch every aspect of the data center to really uncover what's installed versus what's reported, what the intelligence looks like, and how to help you make educated decision as it relates to your hosting environment. We were founded in 2014 by two ex-Microsoft employees. We're global, so we're headquartered in Switzerland. We're out of Germany, the Netherlands. Of course, I'm out of the United States. What we're really known for, though, this is what really differentiates us from maybe a Snow or a Flexera that you may be used to hearing about, is we're known specifically for service providers, and we have a multi-tenant cloud scanner for shared hosting environments as well as dedicated hosting environments. And our goal here is to not only just automate SPLA reporting, but also help you with compliancy, uncover risk before it becomes a risk, as well as profitability. So understanding which customers are profitable and how do you upsell some of your customers and understand what's installed in your data center. From a customer base, we work with over 1,400 service providers and hosting solutions providers on a global basis, and we're growing over 50% annually in this space. So there's certainly a need for our technology. Now, I kind of touched on this a little bit on why we're unique. Again, we're specialized, so again, we focus primarily just on the service provider market, those that are hosting Microsoft software. We're flexible in our delivery because, although I would argue every service provider has similar pain points, no two data centers are the same. So we're very customizable to meet your needs as a partner. And our solution is accredited by KPMG and recognized in the market as that trusted partner. So whenever it, audits support or understand compliancy, rest assured that our solution is something you can trust and certainly something supported by those third-party audit firms. So I mentioned in the agenda, I was going to take you on a trip down memory lane. And I think in order to understand the future, you kind of have to understand the past and really understand the direction Microsoft is going as it relates to SPLA and licensing in general. So if you look at this slide, I know it's kind of an eyesore, but if you look at it from left to right, in the late 90s, when I started in this program, and I'm kind of aging myself a little bit, it was just an ASP model. And then in early 2000s is when Microsoft just officially launched SPLA. And I remember thinking at that time, my boss said, "Hey, Brett, you're going to be managing SPLA." I had no idea what he was talking about. And it's amazing how much that program has stayed the same, but has also changed over the years. Because as you go from left to right, you can see from early 2000, from officially SPLA, to all of a sudden 2010, Microsoft launched BPOS, if anybody remembers BPOS, the Business Productivity Online Suite, which is basically present-day Office 365. And they also launched Azure, so there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. Like, what does this mean for me and my hosting business? Is Microsoft competing against us? What's happening? And as you continue down to scale, you'll see license mobility being launched in 2010. And that added a new layer of complexity because now you have customers bringing licenses into your data center environment. And it's complexity only because license mobility is a software assurance benefit. And a big miss by a lot of service providers is making sure that their customers have active software assurance. And so therefore there's some compliancy risk that evolved. Then to add more complexity, it's the core licensing was introduced for SQL. It used to be by processor, then by core. And then cores for Windows. And then all of a sudden, you look in the present day, now there's qualified multi-tenant hosting, which is quite an acronym and a mouthful, so to speak, which basically allows an authorized partner to host Office 365 in a shared cloud environment. So as you look at this scale and you're looking from left to right, you can almost see the direction Microsoft is going from 100% SPLA, where now all of a sudden we're introducing public cloud into the mix and in-customer licensing. Basically what this is telling us is there's just not one licensing model that service providers have to be aware of. It's multiple licensing models. There's the in-customer licenses, such as an enterprise agreement. There's SPLA. There's CSP for those that want to do QMTH or Office 365. So the complexity has only become more challenging and has evolved over the years. But having said that, a lot of service providers still report without a lot of investment into the reporting. What I mean by that is if you look at it as just as a requirement by Microsoft saying, okay, as part of my agreement, I have to report by the 10th of the month, I'll do that. But for me, coming from the Octopus side and also managing SPLA for so many years, I think there's a miss there. I think reporting should be intelligence into what's really happening inside your data center. And I guess to provide an example is, let's say you're reporting SQL Standard because that's what you've always reported, but yet your engineer installed SQL Enterprise. Obviously, there's a price difference between those two products. And if you get audited, you're on the hook for Enterprise. But that's also telling me you're not charging your customer correctly, which kind of goes down to bullet point 3. It needs to be it needs to be accurate. So you need to understand, how profitable, on a per customer basis, is it to license it out of your own private cloud, which is SPLA in this case, or if your customer is interested in moving to the public cloud, like how profitable is it for you to do so? And so having a picture, that business intelligence that I mentioned earlier, into your data center environment is super important. And I'd also say the biggest miss for SPLA customers is they always have 1 or 2 people responsible for SPLA reporting. Usually it's like an IT admin or maybe an engineer who runs a monthly usage report and sends it to the office admin, who then submits it to Insight or to your reseller. And the problem with that model is what happens if 1 or both of those people leave the organization? All the relationships, all that data is gone. And so our platform helps keep track of everything that you've reported. And I think that helps service providers make an intelligent decision on which direction they want to go as it relates to the future of SPLA. So don't be that guy. So I think, as we look at what does the future of SPLA look like, to summarize, I hate to use this word, confusion. I don't think it's going to be similar to an enterprise agreement. We've heard a lot of rumors that maybe that's the case. We heard it maybe status quo. But I think, Microsoft looks at SPLA in 2 ways. One, they look at it as a growing program, continues to grow despite price increases and competitive pressure. But they also don't look at it as an emerging program anymore. They look at it as a mature program. And so when they launch programs like CSP, which Microsoft would define as an emerging program, a lot of the resources and rebates and incentives move towards those emerging programs. But one of the biggest dilemmas with Microsoft isn't necessarily the SPLA revenue that's being reported. It's they don't know who your end customers are. Like when you report Exchange as an example, they just know you're reporting Exchange. But what Microsoft does not know is why you're reporting Exchange. Why is your customer getting Exchange through you versus getting it through Office 365? And so there's that big miss of data that's really missing at Microsoft. So I could see them putting more restrictions on in-customer reporting. I think you're going to see, I touched on license mobility, uptick in software assurance. I think you're going to see more hybrid use benefits as it relates to Azure. You see that with Windows Server. If you have software assurance on Windows Server, it allows you a lot more flexibility to move to that hybrid model. There's an expansion of listed providers, which may expand into telcos and tier 1 hosters. Listed providers are the Googles, the AWSs of the world, and I can see them expanding that list. Of course, there will always be audits, but that's one of the reasons why Insight is here with their SAM practice, as well as Octopus is here from a business intelligence perspective. And we can see more SPLA audits coming down the pipeline as well. And of course, a push for hybrid cloud, because as you look at that historical slide, you could definitely tell the direction Microsoft is going. So I'll switch gears and talk a little bit about Octopus and how we help service providers, make sense out of all these different complexities. Because service providers, like I mentioned earlier, have to keep track of their own licensing. They have to keep track of in-customer licensing. And now you throw Azure into the mix. And maybe service providers don't want to admit it, but their end customers are being asked by their Microsoft rep to move to Azure. But the question is Azure right for your customer? Or is it right for the private cloud? And how do you make those important decisions? Well, that's where we created, for us, I guess, our aim is to help. We're independent. We're here to help you make these right decisions. We're here to help you maximize revenue that I mentioned earlier. Are you avoiding, revenue loss by hosting everything in your own data center? Is there more potential to maybe add upsell opportunities? Maybe there's Azure Active Directory you can add into your mix. Or, we get asked every day about VDI in SPLA. Well, that doesn't exist in SPLA from a licensing side, or even from a compliance side. But there are VDA opportunities when you start looking at Azure. And are you missing some of that additional profitability by not educating yourself and educating your customers on what workloads are applicable for Azure? And so that provides you insights into end customers and their workloads. There's the performance piece too. Is there more, better performance? Can you increase profitability by making these educated decisions? So I hate to say it, but there's no, magic wand that says you install this tool and all your answers, questions are going to be answered. And that's why we created the cloud roadmap, because the tool is only a portion of this exercise. What we're talking about here is really an assessment. It's helping you plan for what your future data center may look like. And I think, of course, phase one would be understanding what's even installed in your own data center. Because again, how do you make an educated decision to move to the cloud if you don't know what's really even installed in your data center? So we take an inventory, and I'll go through how that works in a minute. But we just don't look at what's installed. We also do a price calculation saying, okay, well, here's what it costs you, including licensing, to run this workload out of your data center. And from that, we'll provide a profitability analysis, and we dive down into even the end customer level. Like, it's one thing to look at a per VM and say, here's what the cost of running this VM looks like, but how many customers are on that VM? And maybe one customer can stay, private cloud, but maybe it makes sense for your company to move to a public cloud for a different customer, even though they may be in the same infrastructure. So it gives you a lot more viability assessments. Maybe there's opportunities for you to right-size infrastructure. Maybe there's an opportunity to review, Azure costs, like what does that same VM, as well as what does that end customer look like? What does the profitability of that look like for that end customer? And all that ties into phase three, which is a profitability report. But all this starts off with phase one, which is, using our platform, our tool, to help collect the inventory. But just because you collect the inventory doesn't necessarily paint the bigger picture. It's a consultative approach. And that's why we partnered with Insight, because they have a lot of experience in this area when it comes to software asset management. But it's even more than software asset management, because we're not only tracking your assets, we're also tracking your end customers' assets as well to see what's viable to move to a cloud environment. So what does this tool do? I talked about it being a business intelligence platform, and it is. When you start looking at like the OC Octopus Cloud Reporter, that paints a picture. It's a pane of glass that shows everything from QMTH, I mentioned Office 365 installs, to what VMs are installed on a particular host. So it provides you that pane of glass platform that you can log in and get that traction that we talked about earlier, when maybe you have one or two people reporting usage. Well, this helps collect that usage and helps keep a footprint of what's happening in the data center. And also, if you do get audited, it provides proof for the auditors, as well as billing purposes. Again, reporting should not be done just to appease Microsoft. It should be done to provide intelligence and provide accurate billing for your end customers. And all this is done by our scanner. It could be agent or agentless, installed on-premise or in the cloud, but scans and automates and identifies from a hardware perspective as well as software on a monthly basis across your entire infrastructure. So we take a look at all the assets, and an asset is defined as a VM or as an actual host. And again, it could be agent or agentless, but all this on top of everything else is we have our own proprietary intelligence, which basically is a rules engine that instead of reading the service provider use rights every month and ensuring that your licensing is accurate, our intelligence will actually spit out a report that will show you, what licenses you could help be compliant and will justify why you're reporting the way you are. So we have some tools and intelligence that's built into this as well. So you're always up to date. We're always in collaboration with auditors, with the vendors, with the community. Brandon mentioned at the beginning of this call, I have my own website, SPLAlicensing.com and MSCloudlicensing.com. And I get a lot of feedback from the community on what service providers need, what they're looking to accomplish, not necessarily what Microsoft is looking to accomplish. And so we built intelligence through that process. So the benefits, and I think I'll go through this pretty quickly. But one of the asks I have from you is if you have questions or you really want to understand how this works. I mentioned the email, sam@insight.com, and certainly email us. And what we could do is we could provide a demo of what this looks like for your data center environment. Because I mentioned, a lot of service providers have the same pain points. A lot of it involves SQL, but no two data centers are the same. And I think it's important that we have a one-off conversation about what's happening in your data center and how this platform may work for you to better track the licenses. And so what benefits of you is, I mentioned there's no magic wand that automates everything because it is a consultative process. The tool is just one piece of the puzzle. And what we want to do is align strategies. Like, what is your strategy, Mr. Customer, as an organization? Like, there's no point in talking about Azure if you don't have a need to move to Azure. Let's focus in on your private cloud. What's happening in your data center to be compliant? Or maybe you have a mix. Like, what are your goals as an organization? And from that platform, we can make educated decisions. We can help optimize, the infrastructure. But ultimately, we'll provide you a roadmap and a strategy. And we can provide insights, and not just what the tool provides, but also what other service providers have done to be successful. And compare cost is one thing, but also we just want to make sure that what the data that we collect is relevant for your business. So the comparisons is more than just cost. And it's also looking beyond the current state. I mentioned the roadmap because we want to make educated decisions of what's right for your business. So, why team with us? Well, I think part of it is we give you complete visibility. So we work in concert with Insight. They have a great SAM team that I mentioned earlier. They have the services to work with you directly and use Octopus as part of the platform to help make these decisions. So again, it gives you that complete visibility. I think one, we want it to be efficient. We want to make sure it's right, I think is also very important. And secondly, compliancy is one thing, and there's always a fear of being audited. I think working with us, as well as Insight, helps put your mind at ease. But again, what we're talking about here is more than just compliancy risk. It's about cost management. You don't want to overpay Microsoft, for one. We'll take a look at unused software as well. It's amazing during an audit how many service providers say, I did not know Visio, as an example, is installed in the data center. It was only meant for 5 people, but yet everybody has indirect access to Visio, and therefore it had to be licensed. Well, not everybody needs the Visio license, but yet you're on the hook for reporting it. So maybe we could take a look at unused software. Maybe we could put some security group policies or something like that in place. And then, of course, just from an overall licensing, maybe what we could do is take a look at what you're currently licensing and saying, okay, well, how many VMs are you running? Maybe it makes sense to run Windows Data Center instead of Windows Standard, or maybe it makes sense to consolidate some of these hosts and run SQL Enterprise instead of SQL Standard, or labeling, right? Like active passive is super important. Like, what does that look like in your data center? A lot of customers use disaster recovery, but never label it in their server naming convention as passive. And for Microsoft's eyes, they're saying, well, you have to prove this is passive. And that's one of the things that we'll take a look at and help coach you through that process. So I talked a lot. I think I've set a record, 26 minutes, 17 slides. So I'm quite proud of myself. So I left some time for some Q&A, but when you start looking at, what does your future look like? We put together some bullet points because I think it's important to have a one-off conversation. Like, if this is important to you, if SPLA reporting, if there's any question about what you're currently doing now, let's have a tool strategy session. Let's do a demo and see exactly what this would look like for you, what the platform looks like. And we talk a lot about audit risk, and I mentioned that Insight does a great job from software asset management. Maybe we take a look at some of the audit risk. Maybe through our conversations, I could help coach you some of the risks that I've seen from other service providers. Let's identify the risk again before it becomes a risk. I guess last, there's a lot of strategies you can use to optimize your SPLA reporting. I mentioned the active-passive scenario with SQL. But part of your SPLA agreement, there's a lot of bullet points that people may not take advantage of, test dev as an example. And so there's a lot of optimization strategies that we could discuss with you as well. And I think, the takeaway from here is, look, it's 30 minutes. Meet with me and the Insight team. And really just to talk about, not us, to talk about you. I do encourage you to reach out to us because we're a partner. We are independent. Whether the public cloud makes sense for you or not is really irrelevant. It's about what is important for you as an organization. And so with that, I think we're opening up for Q&A. And I do want to mention, too, I have my colleague Yuri on the phone who can help answer some of the questions that you may have on Octopus tool in general as well. So I don't know, Brandon, I guess I'll pass it over to you, or Joe. Is there any questions in the list that maybe we need to cover?
We don't actually have any questions as of yet, but I didn't think we even announced the fact that anybody that has any questions can just add them to the Q&A section of the get those questions answered for you. To just one other point that I just wanted to make before we go to those questions is, you bring up great points in managing licenses and you specifically mentioned SQL. Our SQL concierge desk can kind of help you take it a step further, not only helping you with the licensing, but helping you overall with the solution itself and making sure that you're getting the right performance that you're paying for and gaining the most value from your SQL and Windows Server investments. So that's a great point in regards to why our partnership is so important, because not only can we give you a really good not only snapshot, but just a journey of what your licensing investments is, but we can also help you along the way with any kind of consultative information to make you more successful in leveraging those tools.
Looks like we do have a question on, is the tool agent-based? It could be both, agentless or agent, depending on your data center environment and what works for you. I don't know if Yuri, if you have anything you wanted to add to that. Yuri, can you hear us okay?
So guys, Yuri here. I just answered also the question in the Q&A box, but basically what Brett mentioned, yeah, we can scan agentless or with agents or a combination of both, depending if the hoster have all the credentials in place. Because we all know that sometimes you have shared environments, dedicated environments, or just host a VM where your end client can deploy more apps on the VM. In that sense, in those cases, we can also provide the agent to your end client, where it's almost pre-configured, and your end clients only have to fill in the credentials, and then via an API connection, for example, export this data in Octopus Cloud.
So it looks like there's some questions about cost, which certainly always comes up, and we didn't really touch on that on the webinar. Yuri, do you want to address that as well?
Sure. Concerning pricing, we have tier pricing will be applied, and it's based on the number of assets. And what is an asset? Within Octopus Cloud, we determine an asset as the total of hosts and Windows VMs. We only look at those parameters in order to calculate the monthly cost of Octopus Cloud.
Perfect.
We've got 4 more questions in the Q&A box. You guys see those?
Yeah, Yuri, just go through those questions, I guess. As far as the Octopus tool we install in our environment, will are resources like SCCM?
Looking at the question of Mark, what do you mean with when the servers are locked down?
I think some of these we may want to have a one-off conversation, because I think we could really dive deeper into your specific use case, especially when you get into lockdown and things like that.
But basically, whatever the deployment flavor is, agent-based or agentless, at the end, we scan the Active Directory, for example. We scan different IT layers, like the Active Directory, the hypervisor, in order to know the clusters, the hosts, and the VMs, and the hierarchies. We also scan your desktop applications in order to cover a whole 100% covering the SPLA reporting data set. And even there, if you have all the credentials in place and full access to all those IT layers, we can scan agentless. If not, if you only have access to the hypervisor, for example, we can put an agent in the hypervisor, and for the VMs that you have full access as well, or AD domains, we can also scan agentless, because basically we have a scanning management console that scans periodically the frequency of your IT landscape. And where you don't have access or don't have the credentials in place, there at those endpoints, we can put an agent.
Great. Any other questions?
You know, one other thing I wanted to bring up is the fact that as part of this engagement, we really want to also offer our clients the ability to do an assessment, right? Not only go and get the tool and have it go throughout your environment to find these licenses, but have it run for a couple of months and have us not only provide the information, but help you with direction on what to do next. And, Brett, maybe you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to your point, it's around it's assessment-led approach. And like I mentioned on the presentation, is there's no one-size-fits-all for any kind of data center environment. And I think what's important is to have these one-off conversations with you, just to really understand what's going on inside your data center, what's important and relevant for you. It's easy for us to say, again, the magic wand technique, but again, I think as far as the assessments go, it's important to have a baseline and then move upwards on the scale from there.
Definitely.
There was some questions from Mark here. He said he didn't think that it went through. He was asking questions about which hypervisors we support, specifically things like do we support Zen Server, Citrix Hypervisor, XCP-NG?
We can explore this further in other deep dive calls, but basically what we see from our 500 plus installed base as hosters, most of the time we see vCenter from VMware, Hyper-V, Kubernetes, KVM, and those kind of publishers as a hypervisor. But for those other ones, we can explore further or set up a test lab in order to make sure that we can be compatible with those hypervisor technologies as well.
Okay. I think we went through all the questions in list, so we pretty much covered everything we were planning to cover today. As Brett mentioned, the next action item, if you guys want to go further and kind of see what the specific benefits this are to you as a specific environment and your needs, we can schedule a follow-on call. And that's pretty much it. Claire, did you want to wrap up?
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and we appreciate your questions and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.